Afternoon, and thank you all for joining us today. We welcome you to the first of many panel discussions on various health matters that are of relevance to the Indian community in Australia. These talks are brought to you by the Health Practitioner Network, which is a not-for-profit voluntary organization formed under the Friends of India of Australia Association. I'm Dr. Vani Anand, and I'm a GP practicing in Chipping Norton in Sydney. The topic of today's discussion is heart attacks. And joining me on the panel are cardiologists Dr. Kishore Kadapu, Dr. Vishwanathan Venkatachalam, and dietitian Mrs. Raji Jain. And helping me with the technical side of things is Ms. Karishma Kalianda, who is an occupational therapist and a Liverpool City councillor. I would like to invite the panel speakers to briefly introduce themselves to the audience. Shall we start with you, Dr. Vishwanathan?
Hi, thanks for inviting me, and thanks to all the members in the audience as well for listening to this very important talk and discussion on something that's very important for us. My name is Vishwanathan. I'm an interventional cardiologist. I'm attached to the Novus Private Hospital, Sydney Admitted Hospital, and Macquarie University Hospital. And my rooms are basically in Virunga, near the SAN Hospital, and at Bella Vista, close to the Bella Vista station. And I'm an interventional cardiologist. I've got my rooms where we do stress test, echocardiogram, stress echocardiogram. In the hospitals, we do angiograms, angioplasty, stents, and transesophageal echocardiogram, where we put a tube down the valve, look at the heart at close details. That's basically about me.
Thank you. Welcome, Dr. Kishore.
Yeah, thanks, Vani, and thanks for Friends of India and HPN to inviting for this talk. As Vishwanath already mentioned, it is very important to know about your heart. My name is Kishore Kadapu. I am an interventional cardiologist at Liverpool and Campbelltown Hospital.
Thank you, Kishore. Raji?
Thanks, Vani, and thanks, HPN Network. I'm Raji Jaydev, dietitian, accredited practicing dietitian. I have worked in various
I hope the audio is a bit better now. Karishma, are we good to go? Wonderful. All right. Okay, so without further delay, let's get started. Just letting the audience know that your mics will be muted throughout the session. And if you have any questions, please put them into the chat box. And we'll endeavor to answer them towards the end, time permitting. And at the end of the talk, we'll email out a feedback form along with some links to useful websites for everyone. Okay, so let's get into it. First question for Dr. Kishore, if I may.
Yeah.
Please tell us, what is a heart attack?
Okay. Thanks, Vani. To know about the heart attack, you should know a little more about the heart. I'm pretty sure you all studied in your biology classes what heart is. Just can I have my first slide? So the heart is just like any other thing. I usually compare heart as a house, which we have a plumbing system, an electrical system, and we also have a pumping system. So basically, heart attack is affecting the plumbing system of the heart. And as we alluded, both me and Vishwanathan, we are both plumbers of the heart. And you can see there are mainly the heart is supplied by two arteries coming from the aorta, which is a big artery. You can see in the diagram, it is called, which is coming from the right side, which supplies the back of the heart, is called right coronary artery. In the front, you will have a left main, which is divided into left anterior descending artery supplied in the front, and there is another artery going around the heart. Can I have my left next one? So the heart attack is basically when one of these arteries get clogged or blocked because of either it is a cholesterol deposition or a blood clot, which will close the heart artery, which damages just the heart muscle, and which is called as heart attack. In our term, we call the heart myocardial infarction, but common man say it is a heart attack. And you can see in the right side, there is the slide which is showing the buildup of the cholesterol deposition and a blood clot, which narrows the artery, or sometimes it can cause the spasm and can cause the heart attack. And the left side, you can see the cholesterol deposition, which will attract the other blood component like blood cells, platelets, and forms the blood clot, which clogs the artery. This is basically the heart attack.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Kishore. That was a very good explanation. So how exactly does a heart attack present? And are there any differences between men and women in how it presents, Dr. Vishwanath?
That's a very good question. What's the most important thing with heart attacks is that we say time is muscle. So the earlier the patient comes to the hospital or presents to a doctor, better are the chances of survival, treating the heart attack, and getting out as best an outcome as possible. So we encourage patients to present themselves or call for an ambulance as soon as they get the early warning signs. Mind you, sometimes, unfortunately, there may not be any signs at all. So that's one very important thing. But talking about symptoms, common symptoms are what patients describe as angina or tightness on the chest. Some say it's like a ton of bricks sitting on the chest. Some say it's like an elephant on the chest. That's a typical symptom that we call angina. Usually it's not focused at one point. It's just like a five-finger sign, we call it, or Levine sign, we call it. So it's like a generalized chest tightness on the front part of the chest, but it can go to your arms, it can go to your jaws, to the upper back, anywhere from between the lower jaw to the umbilicus, could be from the heart problem. Now, the next important question that Dr. Vani asked me is about gender difference. We all like to believe that there's gender equality, but unfortunately, that's not true for the heart. And having celebrated the International Women's Day recently, I think it's very relevant at this point to say that women are precious and they will remain precious. And one of the reasons for that is because women do not present, women do not realize, women do not complain. And therefore, statistics have shown that, if you look at the slides that I'm showing, statistics have shown that around 22 to 50 Australian women, that means women in Australia, includes Indian women as well, will die every day of a heart attack. And a 40-year-old woman, believe it or not, has a lifetime risk of dying from a cardiovascular disease or suffering from a cardiovascular disease of about 32%. 1 in 3 deaths in women are from heart disease. That is supposed to be the second most common killer. Who's the first? What's the first disease that people can suffer from in women? Dementia, unfortunately. And so heart disease basically amounts to more numbers than stroke, lung cancer, breast cancer, and even lung disease like COPD, emphysema, asthma contributes to. And more women than men die of sudden cardiac death and heart failure after a heart attack. That's very important to remember. So therefore, at this point, I must mention that for women, as I said before, awareness that they can have a problem is low. Therefore, they don't complain, they don't seem to realize, they don't present. And also we identifying more and more that women can have very atypical symptoms. They may not have the typical Levine sign or chest tightness. They may have dizziness, they may have lightheadedness, they may have sweating, you can go to the next one, next slide from this. So nausea, vomiting, abdominal pain, shoulder pain, upper back, neck pain, and we all can think of hundreds of other reasons why it's happening. You could give an excuse saying it's gastritis. It could be muscle pain, could be joint pains, could be palpitations, could be fatigue. So this is important to know that women do present different from men. They have generally they have worse outcome than men, more catastrophic outcome, and they can die more number. The chances that they will die from a heart disease more than in men. So although we believe and we do know that men can be more affected than women, when women have it, it comes out really bad for them. So it's very important to be aware. We are seeing more and more women coming to us, which is good that we are recognizing that this can happen in women, and we're able to save more and more women from dying from a heart attack. Also, not just the atherosclerosis that Dr. Kadappu just showed you, there can be also a component of tear in the artery without any cholesterol plaque. There could be what we call a stress-induced cardiomyopathy or a broken heart syndrome where the artery is going to intense spasm. So there are many things apart from this, like identifying diabetes, polycystic ovaries. So all those things are adding gestational diabetes. So many other risk factors are being more and more identified in women. So women are indeed special, and we should pay more attention to that.
Thank you. That was a very thorough explanation. Thank you. Dr. Kishore, can you tell us what are the various risk factors for getting a heart attack? So who gets them and why do they get them?
All right, Vani, it is, most of us know that few things like diabetes or hypertension can cause the heart attack. Karishma, can I have a slide? But there are two things. One which we can control and another which can't control. Unfortunately, we can't choose our parents. So, it is genetic. If you are genetically predisposed to have a heart attack, you will get a heart attack. Obviously, there are contributing factors and sex, and fairer sex, as Vishwanathan mentioned, the incidence of heart attack is less common in females because of the hormonal protection, but once they attain menopause, probably it will be the same. And race, again, we can't choose. We are born in the Indian race, or I believe most of our audience are Indians. We have high predilection for having the coronary artery disease because of our genetic predisposition and the exposures. And I want to remain in 20 years. Unfortunately, nature will not allow me. I have to age, and with the age comes the risk of heart attack. And as I mentioned, the controllable one, you may get a high blood pressure, but with the medication, you can control it, which reduces the chance of heart attack. High cholesterol, again, is a risk factor for the heart attack. And as you know, smoking, which is obviously bad for not only coronary artery disease, it is bad for overall health. And another thing is the physical activities. If you become sedentary, you will gain weight, which again involve a lot of different mechanism in the body, which will lead into the deposition of the cholesterol in the coronary arteries and all the, like even the brain arteries in that matter. And stress, depression, these are all contributing. Like you are stressed, you will not go out, you will be socially isolated, you have less physical activities, which lead to obesity and increased risk of coronary artery disease or the cardiovascular disease. And diabetes, which is a major killer, it also affects the arteries, which will make the deposition of the cholesterol into the arteries and can cause heart attack. So if you take major risk factors for the coronary artery disease, one is diabetes, second is smoking. That are the killers if you ask me about the heart attack. And why it happens, as I told, one is like you are predisposed to having a coronary artery disease because of your genetic predisposition, compounded with the controllable risk factors makes you more prone to have heart attack. Others may not that much prone. I hope it is clear.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Kishore. Thank you. That was a good breakdown of all the possible risk factors. Now, let's talk about what happens when someone actually gets a heart attack. The first thing, when they think they're having a heart attack, what should they do? What should their family members do? Whom do they call? Where do they go? Dr. Vishwanath.
Thank you. So as I said before, the first and most foremost thing is to identify there's something wrong. You cannot pass it off for an excuse saying that it could be gastritis. Yes, it could be. And we're happy if it is gastritis. But what if it's not? So the main thing is that have a very high level of index of suspicion and think that, yes, this could be the heart. So heart has to be for first and foremost in your thoughts that it could be from the heart. So it's like everyone is, the general saying that you have to, unless proven or guilty, everybody. So that this is the other way around. So unless you prove it's not the heart, it's important to suspect the heart. So unfortunately, as I already said before, you may not have symptoms, but if you're amongst those lucky people to not feel good with all the symptoms that the two of us have been mentioning, the first and foremost thing is to understand this could be the heart. The next step is to stay calm. Do not get too agitated, because fortunately with all the treatment available today, we have excellent results. Long-term outcome still remains good. That is important to remember. Do not panic. Call for help. There is nothing wrong in waking up somebody in the middle of night saying, look, I'm not feeling well. Can you help me? This is to be done, has to be done, because the consequence of not doing that is much worse. Be it your son, wife, children, any family member, please wake them up, please call for help. And that's very important. As soon as you realize this is something possibly wrong with the heart, unless you have a good reason not to take aspirin, please do chew an aspirin. Take an aspirin if it is available, chew an aspirin. I'll come to that in a minute. So chew an aspirin or take an aspirin, call for help. As soon as you feel the symptoms are not right, you have to call for help. So calling for help not only includes calling your family members, you can dial 000 in Australia. They straight away come online. They ask you, what do you want? Ambulance, police, or fire? Just tell them it's the ambulance, and then they take you through a rapid questions, sequence of rapid fire questions, and they'll be at your disposal very soon. Do that before calamity strikes. So that's the most important thing. As soon as you realize something is wrong, call for help, take an aspirin. If you do happen to have anyone's nitrate spray under the tongue, you can use it. We strongly recommend not to use more than 1 or maximum 2 sprays, because that can drop your blood pressure and you can faint. So the most important thing is to identify, call for help, take an aspirin. If you feel that you're losing consciousness or you're not able to keep up, sometimes we advise that you can cough vigorously. That can keep your blood pressure up to some extent. I mean, I must accept that most of the most important things to be done is in terms of getting the artery opened. And that's why the most important thing is to land or reach the site of help, which is a hospital or the ambulance. So these are the most important things to be done at the time of an emergency. If unfortunately you happen to have an event and you have collapsed, or someone known to us has collapsed, what should the family members do? Again, first and foremost is not to panic. And that remains a golden rule. Do not panic, because panic only makes it worse. So this is kind of a rehearsal for us to know what to do, because if it actually happens, you're mentally prepared. To be prepared is half the work done. And so once you're prepared, you know exactly what to do. If you find somebody has collapsed, or if you find that somebody has complained and then collapsed, there is an entity called vasovagal syncope, where somebody has had some pain and because of the pain they collapse. That is different. But if it is a heart problem related collapse, there are a few steps to be done. So can I go to the first slide there, please? The next slide, I mean, which shows about the resuscitation. I'll share this screen with you. So we have a very simple code word here, doctors ABCD. Just remember that. So D is danger. If you find the person is, on a chair or somewhere that they may fall, you're not in the right place, you are driving, you're in a car, please come to a place where it is danger free. So get to a place where it's danger free, check for response. Hello, are you there? How are you doing? Are you okay? That's very important to ask. As soon as you find there is no response, the next thing is to call for help. So S stands for send for help. So send for help could mean yelling, could mean screaming, could mean shouting. For getting help from nearby people, do not please forget to call 000, because they are the ones who can actually come in place and do all those things we cannot do at home. The next thing you can do is after doing the D, R, and S, look for the airway. See if they are breathing after that. When you say airway, open the mouth and see for obvious causes. If somebody is kind of not able to chew something that is stuck in the throat, if they are not having seizures, and if it is safe for you to put your finger into their mouth, please do that. Swipe that foreign body out and turn them to the left lateral side or right side so that they are not actually aspirating or swallowing that into their windpipe. But if they otherwise you find the mouth is okay, let them remain flat. That's a safe position. Check for breathing. You can look for breathing in the abdomen, the chest. You can also put your finger across and feel if there is breathing felt or not. You can listen if they are breathing or not. If you find that they are not breathing, go to step C, which is CPR. If they are breathing normally, monitor their breathing. If you can put a hand on the pulse, that's excellent. If you cannot, do not worry. If you want to feel for the pulse, the best place to feel for the pulse is just below the angle of your mandible. And you can start practicing right now. As obvious to everybody, do not press both sides together. That's not going to help. But one side at a time, feel for the pulse. It's a good point to start where you start feeling how to feel for your pulse. How do you start CPR? So it's actually a very dedicated team effort to explain that to everybody. But if I might just simply explain to you, if it's an infant, you can use a finger. If it's a young person or an adult, you can use the whole of the palm. So you're meant to interlock one palm into the other palm. Do you want to show it for us, Kishore, just how to do it? So this is the way you hold your two palms and be vertically on top of the chest.
And hold your elbow straight, basically. You should not.
So hold the elbow straight, go perpendicular onto the chest. At that stage, be a bit merciless. Why am I saying that? Because the chest has to dip by at least 1 to 1.5 inches down. So what you're doing here is you're manually squeezing the heart to be able to reproduce what the heart would normally do. So how much should you do? How far should you do? So basically do it till you find there's some sign of recovery. So if you can imagine, if this is the heart right here, and if this is the sternum right here, the place to do the CPR is just at the lower end of the bone that you can feel called the sternum in the front of your chest, just the lower part. And that's exactly where the heart is sitting. So if you're pressing on the chest wall where I showed you, you're actually pressing on the heart. And that's the way you're supposed to do. The current belief, the current working formula is that spend more time compressing the chest than giving any mouth-to-mouth breathing. You need to give 30 compressions followed by 2 mouth-to-mouth breathing if you can give it safely. That's excellent. So please focus on the CPR or the actual cardiac massage you're giving. As we said, be a bit merciless because only if you're a bit, even if you break a bone, cause a fracture, that's not a problem. Main thing is the person survives. How long do you do it for? If you can get help of somebody else, excellent, because you don't want to tire yourself out. So do it about for a minute or minute and a half, as much as you can do. Ask for help or support if somebody is around you. If not, unfortunately, there is no option. And then keep going with that. You've already called for the 000 in the previous formula of doctors ABCD. You've already called for help. So please do it until the ambulance arrives and then they'll take over. Now, the D part is a defibrillator, which obviously we don't have it. But in some public places, there is facilities available. You're on a sports ground, you're on an open field where they have, if you do have, and if you're, it usually comes with instructions on it. So if you can use it, go ahead with the defibrillator because that actually is what saves life. And then once that is done, CPR, if it is done at the right time, in the right form, can save life. So do not give up. And until somebody wakes up or you find consciousness coming back, or if you can feel a pulse, that's safe to do so.
Thank you, Dr. Vishwanathan. That was really useful. And I think we are encouraging as many people as possible to undertake a first aid course. There are many, many resources available online, as well as community organizations which run first aid courses. Please look up something in your local area and try to make yourself aware of this very important skill. All right, so the unfortunate person has had a heart attack. They have arrived in emergency department, Dr. Kishore. What happens then? What tests will they be put through to confirm the diagnosis, and how do they get treated?
All right, Vani. I mean, before going there, I want to just continue what Vishwanath told. Uh, Calling the 000 is very, very important. If you suspect you had a heart attack or something related to heart, you have to call 000. Reason being, there are two types of treatment you will get when you have a heart attack. One, what we call the primary angioplasty, where we take the person into the cardiac catheterization lab where we will open the artery. And the second option, which is not as good as probably primary angioplasty, is to give a medication which will lyse the clot. So now in New South Wales, we have a system called the total reperfusion strategy, where all the ambulance is equipped with taking an ECG and transmission of that ECG into the hospital where we provide the primary angioplasty service. So if you drive yourself or your family member drives you into a hospital, for example, in the Southwest, if you go to the Bowral Hospital or a Campbelltown Hospital after hour, you will get a medication to lyse the clot. Even though it is not very inferior, but you have a superior choice of therapy. The same thing in the north, if you present to the Ryde Hospital or Hornsby Hospital, again, you will be given the thrombolysis rather than getting the primary angioplasty. So please call 000 rather than driving yourself to the hospital. That is very important. So once you reach the hospital, we do the diagnosis based upon the ECG. So if you are having a ongoing heart attack, then you will be taken into the cardiac cath lab, where Karishma, can I have that my slide? Next slide. And basically, if you already taken aspirin, we will not give further aspirin. Otherwise, we will give aspirin. We will give you the painkillers. And once we made the diagnosis, we may give some blood thinners, and we will take you to cath lab and yeah, the other one, the first one you put. Sorry. Yeah. So you can see there is a coronary arteries that is narrowed, and you will have the clot there. So we usually pass a balloon. We break that clot or break that the cholesterol plaque and establish the blood flow. Then we will put a stent. So this is the basic treatment for the acute heart attack. Obviously, if you had an acute heart attack, your heart needs a rest. It can go into the abnormal heart rhythm. So you will be monitored in the coronary care unit, usually 4 to 5 days. And if there is no complication, we will let them go home. Otherwise, usually 4 to 5 days, you will be observed in the coronary care unit.
You have a prop there. Would you like to talk about it?
So as Dr. Kadappu said, you reach the hospital and we do the angioplasty and stents. So just to give you an idea how these tubes look, this is how the tubes look. These are called catheters, and they go all the way. Nowadays, we prefer the arm approach. So we go right from the radial artery, go straight into the heart from the other end. So that's how long these tubes are. And then we use the wires and balloons that Dr. Kadappu mentioned to navigate through these catheters, and they reached right into the heart arteries that Dr. Kadappu showed you earlier. And then we put the balloon in, balloon comes out, stent goes in, and stent stays there, and then we give you more medication. So this is basically the actual tube. This is a real-time tube that actually we use for doing the angioplasties.
Thank you for that. I'm sure it's very interesting for our listeners to actually see what kind of tools you work with. Okay, so it seems that our patient has survived his heart attack, and he has been treated at the right time by some wonderful cardiologists. And so people would like to know, or I would like to know next, what happens after the event? How is their road to recovery? What is the aftercare and precautions they should follow? What are the time frames they're looking at to get back to normal life?
That's of course quite relevant and a good question that obviously someone has asked us. So following the discharge, the most important thing is to realize that something went wrong. And the reason for knowing that or remembering that is not because you want to be brooding on that or feeling bad about that. The main reason is because we have to focus on what was not done before that we can do differently now. For example, if you were a smoker, that's fine. Meaning, I'm not saying it's fine to be a smoker. The past is gone. So no more smoking now. Once you realize that the cause was uncontrolled diabetes, then focus on the diabetes, focus on the cholesterol, the blood pressure, the weight. So that remains important. I make it a point, usually in the very early stages, tell the patient that this is what is happening and this could be the reason why this is happening, not because I want to scare them. It's because the point of realization is best when it actually is happening and the correlation is very well established. They don't make the mistake of not remembering this in the future. So once Dr. Kadappu has done the angioplasty and is discharged the patient, obviously the hospital gives you a discharge summary. Your responsibility is to make sure you don't miss the tablets. Usually the spouses are pretty good monitoring you. And if not, your friends could be good, your children could be good. So have someone in charge and they remind you when your tablets have to go in. It could be going on a reminder on the clock or something to remember. So please do not stop medicines. I'm quite comfortable for you to go into Google and search for the drugs and things like that, but do not trust Google enough to stop the medicine. We are available. Call us, ask us. This is important, I think, because most of the non-compliance or stopping medicines happen because of some auntie told us this, my friend said this patient had a bad side effect. Yes, side effects can happen, but remember the disease kills more than the drugs kill. So the difference is huge. So the most important thing is go back to your lifestyle modification, go back to taking the medicines regularly. What actually happens is when we discharge you, we give you a discharge pamphlet. We explain to you at different levels. The doctor talks to you, the nurse talks to you, the pharmacist talks to you, and we make sure the family is present. So everybody understands what the pact is, what the deal is. We get to discharge you, and then we call for your follow-up. So usually the practice is to go back to your GP within a week, then come back to the cardiologist in a month, and then that continues. We also strongly encourage, because studies have clearly shown that if you go for rehabilitation, which includes an expert dietitian's opinion, it includes some exercise programs to be given. If it has been a major heart attack, we generally say do not drive for 2 weeks. And of course, if you are a heavy alcoholic, we give you advice regarding that. If you are a smoker, it's best to go off that. If you have not been focusing on the diet and exercise, that is important. Those days are gone where we used to tell the patients to take bed rest. We hardly advise bed rest to anybody. That doesn't mean you jump back into the gym and go on your motorbike and your treadmill and start doing it. We advise you. It depends upon how your body responds. Everybody is different. So that is why the rehabilitation program is important. So we can assess your own needs, give you a custom-made advice regarding how much of exercise, what to do, what diet to go on for, what suits you best. We do respect your palate, so we can advise you regarding what is best for you. And we generally say refrain from sweets. It's a common theme. We do not advise sugar, butter, smoking, and obviously the rest of this, the dietitian is here to explain. Raji will tell us in details, but this becomes a very important parcel that we send you with: diet, exercise, lifestyle modification. Dr. Kadappu briefly mentioned about stress, about depression. We have studies showing that people who have got a positive attitude in life do much better. People who do yoga and meditations, all those ancestors of ours were yelling for many years. Well, they were not yelling. If they were yelling, that's not yoga. So they were propagating to us that it's very important for us to go into these things. So meditation, exercise, yoga remains a very important basis to it. But please understand, this is not a substitute. We call it as complementary therapies, which means that diet, exercise, lifestyle modification, medications all go hand in hand. Do not replace one for the other. They ought to go together. Then focus on your cholesterol. We advise you what your sugar should be. And as I said, there are limitations about when you can drive, when you cannot drive. We advise you about what activities to go for. And people feel very comfortable asking us very personal questions about their own personal life, their sex life. So it's not like you are basically in a very bad situation. You're going to be made to feel as normal as you can. Of course, subjected to what damage has happened. How soon did you come across? How many arteries were blocked? what had to be done, what was your basal heart line doing, what was your basic heart function at the start. So based on that, we give you a proper tailored advice regarding what exercise to go for, how much to do. So please follow those boundaries and respect that kind of line there, and you will not regret. Generally speaking, as I said before, prognosis remains pretty good. Most of the patients, they tend to go well. Of course, the risk remains higher than any average individual, but so what? We can manage it. And the main thing is to be aware that there's always help available. Any questions, do not take your own decisions. Call, ask, and we're always there to help you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So we have had, we've run through really well the warning signs, the symptoms, the emergency management, the aftercare. Thank you very much. That was very elaborate and descriptive. Thank you. Now let's talk about getting tested beforehand. So trying to evaluate your own risks, people with strong family history of heart attacks. And I would like maybe both of you to share your ideas on how people should go about getting preventative heart health checks beforehand, even before they are going to be faced with the risk of a heart attack.
All right, Vani, it is a very important and very good question. The best thing is the prevention, than the cure. And it is always important to control the risk factors to prevent the heart attack or any cardiac events. So if you have a strong family history, then you should be careful regarding the smoking. If you have a high blood pressure, it should be well controlled. And if you have diabetes, it should be well controlled. You should do regular exercise. And obviously, you have to have a good diet and have a healthy lifestyle. And screening for a heart disease, unfortunately, there are different views and different restrictions nowadays. Medicare will not cover you just doing a stress test or doing a CT coronary angiogram for the just the sake of finding out, because they, of course, if if you're paying from your own pocket, you can get it done, but that is not the recent recommendations. So once you control the risk factors, if you get symptoms, you should be get tested. That varies, depends on the symptoms. We may advise you to have a stress test. That is, you put on the treadmill, put on the ECG monitor. We do an ultrasound of the heart called the echocardiogram before and after the exercise to see whether there is any change in the ECG or any change in the pumping action of the heart, to see any part of the heart is not contracting after the exercise. That indicates one of the arteries not giving enough blood supply. Or if you think they have a high cholesterol, whether we have to start the tablets like a statin, which controls the cholesterol. There are a lot of evidence to say that if your calcium score is more, you should be on statin, even though your cholesterol is just upper limit of normal. So it all depends on how well you control your risk factors before going into the screening test. So first thing is to control your risk factors. Then if you have any symptoms, obviously you have to have further testing done.
Dr. Vishwanath, would you like to add anything, especially if Dr. Kishore mentioned the calcium score? A lot of
Sure.
patients are aware of it.
Yeah.
Nowadays,
Yeah, I'll touch upon this calcium score and the confusion with regards to the calcium score often we talk about. But just to reiterate and re-emphasize what Dr. Kadappu just said, that Medicare has made it very clear that if you do not have symptoms, then they will not reimburse what has been paid for in terms of a rebate for the stress testing. But that's a very kind of obscure area, I would say, because if I speak to my patients and ask them 5 times, what can you do without having any problems? And then they come out saying that, oh, well, I don't do much, I just walk on level ground. And then I ask, why is that? Oh, because when I walk uphill, I get breathless. When I climb stairs, I get breathless. And interestingly, as I said before, if spouses come along, the patients usually like to say, I don't know whether it's a stigma or whether it's just not recognizing the problem. Patients usually come and tell us, I'm fine, doctor. My GP has asked me to come and see you. I'm not sure if I should be seeing you. And then the spouse goes, who's falling behind? When you're walking with me, you never keep pace with me. And so there are ways that we can actually inquire, ask ourselves, are we doing what we were doing before the same way? Have things changed in the last 6 months, 12 months or not? And they may like the answer there. You may have done something and it's not necessarily aging. We often find it easy to say, give an excuse saying, I'm getting old, so I'm not supposed to do this. I can't do this. That may not be true. What if it's from the heart? So just to touch about these tests, what we normally do, as Dr. Kadappu said, we can do a stress test. For people who cannot walk, we can do a dobutamine stress echocardiogram, where you can actually walk on the, without walking, you can actually have a chemical make you feel like you're walking on the treadmill, get your heart rate up. So basically it's challenging the heart. Who needs this test? So basically, if people are at high risk and if they have any symptoms, even if you think they are not from the heart, but could be from the heart potentially, they need a testing. Now, is there an age concern? Yes, we're recognizing more and more as we turn about 45 years of age. It doesn't have to be 75, 80, 90 anymore. Even above 45 years of age, if you're having any of these symptoms, even if they are subtle, please get tested. With regards to the calcium score, there are clear guidelines now. What is this calcium score business? So Dr. Kadappu showed us on the slides before that these arteries get hardened. They get the cholesterol plaque, they could get a clot, they could get, yes, we can show, you can show one of my slides as well. I've got my slides there. And when the clot comes in, there is heart attack formed, but sometimes it may not form a clot. It may gradually get narrow and narrow and narrow. And calcium is not about the calcium you eat, mind you. The body needs calcium. The body needs calcium for the bone, for the gums, for the teeth. But the calcium that is circulating in blood, my slides. So the calcium that's circulating in the blood, for a good reason, if there is inflammation. So the theory is all based on inflammation. Coronary artery disease is supposed to be inflammatory disease. So if there's inflammation from the plaque, then the calcium goes and gives company to the plaque. So calcium adds on. Now you must remember there are two kinds of blockages of the arteries, the calcified blockage and the non-calcified blockage. Now, if you purely talk about the calcium, you may not have calcium, but may still have heart disease. So you can look at the slides now, and you can see that vascular disease results in a lot of problems. And there could be bleeding, there could be clots in the arteries, and there could be changes in the eyes. Bottom line is there could be two kinds of plaques. There could be the calcified plaques or the non-calcified plaques. So remember, if you have no calcium, but you still have plaques, that is still needing treatment. So the calcium assessment is only to see if there's calcium present or not. And based on that, we can further risk stratify you. Now, the clear guidelines are that if you are less than 40, 45 years of age, you are at low risk, you do not need this. If you are definitely high risk, you are a diabetic, you are a smoker, there's family history and you've got symptoms, then definitely you're not going for a calcium score because you need to go beyond. Calcium score is just one way of assessing your risk. So we are still at a primitive stage. Yes, agreeably, higher your calcium score, higher is your risk. So higher the risk of having a heart attack, higher the risk of having a stroke, higher risk of dying. But calcium score is only for the intermediate risk, so as to put you into a different category. So as your category moves up, we know you got more warning, got to be extra careful, everything changes. What is normal blood pressure for an average person? What is normal cholesterol for an average person? What is normal sugar? Everything changes depending on your risk. So if you are having the calcium score done for the relevant person who is the intermediate risk, not the low risk, not the high risk, that pushes you into a different zone. For example, if your calcium score is 0, there's less than 1% chance you'll have some problems in the next 10 years, provided you're not a diabetic, you're not a smoker. So it just adds on. If you have a calcium score of more than 400, then your risk of having a problem is more than 20%. Now, less than 10% is generally considered low risk. 10 to 20% risk is considered medium or intermediate risk, and more than 20% risk is considered high risk. So it helps you sub-classify yourself into a more valid risk assessment scoring system. So that helps you. So, but please do not forget, you still can have non-calcified plaques, still causing the same problems, still causing a heart attack. And also remember, while on statins that Dr. Kadappu mentioned, statins are life-saving tablets. And if you're on a statin, sometimes paradoxically, your calcium score may go up because sometimes calcium can be a sealing to prevent like a volcanic rupture of the plaque. So there are a lot of things inside. Do not take things for face value. Ask us and we are here to help you.
Thank you so much. Dr. Kishore, just a little bit about why diabetics are more prone to heart attacks. We have a lot of diabetic patients in our community, and of course, their fear is about heart attacks. So, just a little bit about why they are more at risk.
When it is just like, if you are in the sea, there is plenty of water around, but nothing to drink. It is the same thing happens. There is lot of sugar in the arteries, in the blood, but it is not getting inside the cells where it has to be utilized. So glucose, or the component of sugar, which is a sort of toxic or dangerous to the health of the arteries, which can which can do harm in the injuring the artery, which will attract all the cholesterol, everything to heal the arteries, and which can get deposited in the arteries. So basically what happens when there is lot of sugar, the chemically, if you say it is a oxidization process and all these things, there are free radicals which will damage the arteries. And obviously the healing process is to the other materials from the blood will come and deposit there, which makes the artery hardened. It is just like having a scar in your skin. So there is a scar in the arteries. So when you're diabetic, if it is not well controlled, there are a lot of scarring, which makes the artery very hardened, and which also attracts the cholesterol, which will get deposited. Charishma, can I have this slide? So basically it will come, get attracted, cholesterol will get deposited, the next one, thanks. So you see that if the artery is well opened, it is a smooth surface, everything goes freely. When there is a damage to the inside of the arteries, cholesterol will come, get deposited, makes the artery harden, and you can see the left side, there is, the narrowed artery, blood flow is very difficult. So that is what basically happens in the diabetes. Every artery is in the body. It may be heart arteries, it can be the brain arteries, it can be the leg arteries. All arteries will be getting the narrowed, and that is what causes the more risk of having a heart attack. And usually people may not know that they will have all these things. What I usually explain to the patient, it is like a termite. When I started initially, the body is, the heart or body is just like a building. Okay, so when termite comes, Cheshma, can I have my last line? So when termite comes, it just eats the building. You never know. The high blood pressure, diabetes, cholesterol, everything come, and it slowly harms the body. But you will come to know when it is collapsed. Okay, unless you tested earlier. That is why it is imperative to get yourself tested. Make sure that your sugar is good, your cholesterol is good, and if it is not, get medications to control it, so that if termite inspector comes every year, we get the building termite inspection. If there is some termite, you can do the treatment. The same thing, if there is diabetes, control it so that it will not eat the body. So please aware, yeah, it is easy to understand. Get the things done early so that you will not worry later. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I think we will pose some questions to our dietitian now before we run out of time, because I know everyone's waiting for some really useful and yummy tips, which are still heart friendly, I hope, Raji. So, all right, why don't you start off with telling us, what do you think is a healthy diet?
Thanks, Vani. To explain what a healthy diet is, I'm going to show you a poster. Karishma, can we have that poster? Australian Guide to Healthy Eating. This comes from Australian Health Department. Okay, Australian Guide to Healthy Eating. What this poster says is foods are divided into 5 groups. Every day, for general good health, we have to eat foods from all these 5 food groups. What are these 5 food groups? Let's start from vegetable group, which is on the right hand upper half of the poster. We should eat all colorful vegetables for 400 grams per day. Next section, we can see all sorts of fruits. We need about 300 grams of fruits per day per person. Look at the next section. It is dairy foods. And it contains milk, yogurt, and cheese. We need about 2 to 3 serves of dairy foods per day per person. The next section is the protein foods. Protein foods are, there are lentils and dry beans like chickpeas and yellow lentils, red lentils, and rajma beans, and also nuts like peanuts and almonds. And there is meat, chicken, fish, and also seafoods like prawns and eggs. They are the protein foods. With regard to protein foods, we have to choose lean meat, skinless chicken, and also legumes. For vegetarians, protein foods are legumes. We must eat at least 1 cup of cooked legumes to significantly lower our cholesterol levels. And with regard to meat, chicken, fish, we need about 150 grams to 200 grams per day. And other segment, carbohydrate foods on the left hand half portion, top of the healthy plate. Carbohydrate foods are grains and cereals like rice, wheat, oats, bajra, ragi. And so foods made with these grains, pasta, noodles, and bread, and these carbohydrate foods. With regard to carbohydrate foods, we have to choose high fiber foods. Fiber is in whole grains. It is not in refined flour or white bread. So it is very important to choose high fiber grains and cereals. How much of these carbohydrate foods we need per day? It depends on our activity and our age and our gender. And coming right down on, to the bottom of the poster, on the right-hand side, we see some high-fat, high-sugar foods, and then fruit juice, alcohol, and all those foods like chips and chocolates and sausages and donuts. They are very high in fat and high in sugar, not for good health. So we have to eat. If we have to eat, it is only sometimes and in small amounts. They are for special occasions only. They are not the everyday foods like in the meal plate, like in the healthy eating plate. And on the other side, on the left-hand side, bottom of the poster, we have some couple of types of oils and also butter. We need some fat in our diet. So we need to eat, we need these oils, use them in cooking, a little bit of oil in cooking. That's about, in brief, general healthy eating. Yeah.
Thank you. That's really useful. I think that's a really good resource to go to for everyone, including moms of little children who want to start their kids off on a healthy diet straight away. How do we put all this knowledge into practice? So what would an ideal plate of food look like, Raji?
Okay. Karishma, can I please have the healthy meal plate? Including all these foods I mentioned, the foods from all 5 food groups is for everyday eating is not hard, but it needs a little bit of planning. I will show you a healthy meal plate. It's already up there. You can see the right hand half of the plate shows pictures of vegetables. So half of your meal plate, whether it is for lunch or dinner, it should be filled by vegetables. As I previously already said, choose colorful vegetables. Half of your meal plate should be filled by vegetables. Other quarter of the plate should be filled by protein foods, that is top of the plate, left-hand side, protein foods. And I have already mentioned protein foods for vegetarians are legumes, so that is pulses, lentils and dry beans. And for non-vegetarians, there is meat, chicken, fish, and eggs. So they should only take a quarter of your plate. And the other quarter of your plate should be filled by carbohydrate foods, starchy vegetables and grains and cereals. Again, I stress this point, when you choose the carbohydrate foods, you should choose high fiber foods. When you choose animal protein foods, you should choose low fat foods. Okay, with regard to protein foods, I can make, so I will make a meal. So your meal plate, you fill top of the half of the plate with vegetables, colorful vegetables, quarter of the plate with rice or chapati, and with the chapati or rice goes the protein foods like chickpea masala or rajma. So you are including a rice and curry or chapati and chickpeas or legume dish and the vegetables. This should be your meal plate.
Excellent. Thank you. Just a little bit about the foods that are good for lowering cholesterol, if you like.
Okay, yeah. Before that, I forgot to mention, when I was mentioning about a healthy meal plate, I talked about protein foods and vegetables and also carbohydrate foods, but I forgot to mention about fruits and dairy foods. They are also one of the 5 food groups. And fruits and yogurt, you can eat it anytime during the day, and also drink a glass of milk at night. It would be, put you to nice, good sleep. Now coming to what foods rise our cholesterol levels. Saturated fats, foods with saturated fats and trans fats, they rise our blood cholesterol levels. Okay, yeah. Okay, those foods high in saturated fats and trans fats are all junk foods, our lovely food. Chips, chocolates, cakes, biscuits, sweets like gulab jamun, deep fried foods like pakodas, chuda, haldiram snacks, and also all animal products contain saturated fats and trans fats. To control our blood cholesterol levels, we must choose lean meat, as I said before, lean meat and skinless chicken, low-fat cheese and low-fat paneer. I know it is not available. So if you are using paneer, use a very little amount. And also choose fat-free milk and fat-free yogurt. Many Indians, they don't like skim milk and fat-free yogurt. They say we are using light milk and low-fat yogurt, but that is not enough. And lastly, limit foods containing cholesterol, eggs and prawns. Plant foods do not contain cholesterol.
All right, thank you. That was very informative. I think we are running out of time. So I will maybe take one question for anyone who would like to answer. There is an audience question that says red wine versus white wine. Which one's better for the heart, obviously?
Yeah.
Yeah, you can.
Okay. So I was, yeah. If I have to talk about red wine or white wine, if patients ask me, what I say is, if you have to drink wine, then make it red wine. And another thing I really wanted to stress is, if I outlined what a healthy diet is, what foods rise cholesterol levels, and also there are some foods which lower cholesterol levels. We don't have time to go on that now, but if your diet is not good, adding red wine or adding fish oil supplements or adding turmeric or any of these would not help. First, we have to get the basic diet right, and then maybe supplements or red wine may help.
Doctors, you agree with that?
Yeah, look up I always, the question of wine or alcohol is always every patient after the heart attack, usually they ask, oh, good, doctor, look, we heard wine is good for heart. Can we have wine? I usually say, okay, at moderate, probably all right. But if you drink more, you may not die of heart attack, but because of liver disease. So it is, the choice is yours, you die of liver or heart. So always moderation, probably as Raji mentioned, out of these two, probably most of the studies are on the red wine, which is sort of beneficial if you take a glass. We usually allow two standard units for male, one standard unit for female. So yeah.
Can I say something
Yes.
about that? Yeah. Why red wine is beneficial for heart health is because it contains resveratrol. This resveratrol is a polyphenol. It is protective to heart. But what I say is eat red grapes and also eat peanuts with the red skin on it. That supplies you enough resveratrol. With the red wine, you also get the alcohol, which we don't want.
Thank you. That's very useful. Thank you, everyone, for attending this session. We hope we have conveyed some key messages out today into the community. I'm sorry we couldn't go through everything. I will now call upon Ms. Karishma to come in and close the session for us.
Thank you. Look, I just wanted to thank everyone who registered, who participated by sending questions, and who have expressed their interest in these events. We were actually quite overwhelmed by the level of enthusiasm within the community for events like this, and we will hopefully be able to organize events around topics like diabetes, other types of cardiovascular disease, as well as things like back issues, mental health issues, those sorts of topics as well. In the next few days, we will be sending out a survey to get your feedback on what you found worked, what you thought we can do better for the next one. We're hoping to organize the next session like this in May around diabetes. Going forward, the survey that you all completed to register showed us that people would like around 5 Zoom sessions to 1 in-person session. So if that's the kind of format that you're interested in, we would love to hear from you. If there were any topics or considerations that you wanted more information about, please let us know through the HPN email address that you have already used to register through. And we will send you some links, we'll send you resources and further information so you can be best informed about these topics. So thank you to all of those that participated again. And I can't forget to thank the amazing panel that we have had today, who have just enriched us with their knowledge and I'm sure made a difference to the lives of so many out in the community. So to each and every member of our panel today, from the FOIA Health Professionals Network, I would like to express my deepest gratitude for sharing your knowledge.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you all, and absolutely no doubt we have had such a scintillating session, and yes, in addition to what Charishma has said and what the panel has said, that's all right. That's all right. No. So we do have a few mementos to thank the panel, and we have the members of the executive of Friends of India who have kindly come as a surprise to the panel members. They weren't actually expecting this, and so we would like to thank each and every one of them. So Dr. Vani Anand obviously has been. She's a GP and she's been able to conduct the panel very well, and we thank her for her efforts today. Thank you. And Mr. Raji has is the dietitian who has also helped, and we would like to offer our thanks to Ms. Raji as well. Yes, I'm sure all of you are clapping virtually. And to Dr. Kishore, one of the cardiologists of the session, we thank him as well for his kind contribution.
Thanks, Sebastian. Thank you. Thanks. Thank you.
And Dr. Vishwanathan as well. Yes, the others. Right.
It was special.
Also to add to our other cardiologists. Dr. Vishwanath, thank you so much for. They will have their contacts as Vani has mentioned. They will have their contacts available as well. And finally, all the background support and getting it sort of together, being able to respond to all of your emails, your queries, your chats, and setting up the survey form and really making this work today. We sincerely thank our own Charishma. And another round of virtual clap, please. Once again, thank you all for having participated. As mentioned, the recording of this will be available shortly on the Friends of India website, and all those who've registered will get emails. And please contact any of us if you haven't. And we look forward to having you again in the future. We will now be ending the session. Thank you very much.